this is just a quick agenda of what we're going to cover. And I actually don't have a ton of slides for this session. I have a couple different homework pieces that that I wanted to share, some take-home things for you too, and wanted to be encouraging as well, and then just also open it up for any questions that you might have. I know that technical interviews, of all the interviews, at least in my opinion, are the scariest. And so I'd love to give you the chance to ask any questions that might help put you at ease a bit. And then, feel free to message me afterwards too if anything comes up. So let's go ahead and dive in. Hopefully, if my slides work. So I am a member of Talent Stacker. I went through the program like all of you. I joined in December of 2021. I landed my first job in May of 2022. I'm still in that at that place of work. My technical title is an engagement manager. I was promoted at the beginning of this year from an associate consultant role, which is the position I stepped into when I started. It is a Salesforce partner. And I do like to just preface this to say this is in no way reflective of my time at the Hunley Group is where I work at. I actually try to stay as far as I can away from the recruitment angle a little bit, just because it's a whole different realm for me. But like I said, I have over 10 years of experience in recruitment and human resources. And having gone through this process myself and helping others walk through it, definitely have some experience to share with you there, but just want to level set that I don't represent the Hunley Group in my opinions or recommendations in any way. I am 8-time Salesforce certified. Haven't notched any here in quite some time, just really been more heads down on my new role and digging into more of the technical pieces. So I wanted to kind of level set at the top some of the baselines of a technical interview. So one of the questions is, who is that going to be with? And a lot of times that depends on the type of role that you're applying for. In my experience and from what I've seen, it'll often be with a teammate. If you're at a consultancy, it might be a solution architect or a manager. I think a manager would be what you would expect to see if you were applying for like a general admin type position. My experience, I like I said, work at a consultancy. So my first job, I interviewed with a solution architect. Now, this usually takes place after quite a bit of vetting. It would be unusual to see a technical interview right out of the gate. So I usually have seen it when, you do that general phone interview, and that's kind of that general screening, like, is this someone we really want to spend some more time talking to? And then you would most often have more of a cultural interview. Are they a good fit? Do they have a baseline technical ability, some background in our area or industry that we're looking for? And if you pass that round, then you would see a technical interview being more common if it's done. So this is usually set up in what I've seen by a recruiter or a hiring manager, again, after that cultural interview. And the purpose is just to level set on your technical abilities. I usually see them being about 30 minutes in length if they are live. And we're going to talk through the various types that I've seen in this ecosystem. A lot of them actually are take home, and there's a couple different flavors of technical take home interviews. So we'll talk through those as well. If they are live, though, like I said, about roughly about 30 minutes in the hot seat. And then, like I said, it would be timed. Some of those are a shorter timed interval, and others of them can be longer, where it's a take home where you have multiple days to complete it. So just some general quick tips and prep, some things that you can start doing now to prepare if you don't have a technical interview on the horizon, but you want to kind of get your mind ready for that, is document and study what you're building. If you're building things now through the Talent Stacker program, through your project, through through any of the live build alongs or whatnot, I'd highly encourage you to document that. One, because it's great practice. You will do documentation most likely in this area and in this field. And two, it gives you something that you can reflect back on, to have really clear ideas of what it is that you built. You'd be surprised in 3 months' time, you're going to be like, what was that flow I built for? And what was the use case? And how did it trigger? Having that quick reference is really helpful. As part of that documentation, you're going to want to know why you built it. What was the use case that you were solving for? And why did you build it one way versus another way? And we're going to talk here at the bottom, this super sleuth. I'll come back to that in a second of why that's important. And then finally, how did you go about building it? I have a coworker actually who uses a tool called Notion, and she just puts a lot of her higher level builds in there. So in 3, 6, 9 months, a year, down the line, she can refer back to some of those harder flows that she's built. And you'll be surprised in not just in this initial round of a technical interview, but as you advance and progress in your Salesforce career, how you're going to need to be able to still talk about things that you've built, even though you're not entry level anymore. I'd also encourage you as preparation to understand the basics of Salesforce. And this is really kind of admin 101, right? The security, the layouts, record types, assignment rules, approval processes, and flows for sure. So the super sleuth. This is more reflective of what you see in the talent stacker offerings in general. I have found that the most successful talent stackers that I've helped along, they can take it to the next level. And what does that mean? Well, in a technical interview, that looks like being able to throw some things into your design if it's a take-home project that are reflective of the business that you are interviewing for. And that's going to be part of our exercise today. But it's also that ability to say, like I said before, why did you build it one way versus another way? And being able to speak to that clearly. It's that next level step that shows that you're not just entry level, you're not just the same as everyone else who's applying for the job. You really understand their business and you've done your homework, and you can add those little details into your build. The final tip I have here is do review the phone interview training from February. It does have applicable tips on video and lighting and presentation skills. And I know it sounds like phone interview, but if you haven't watched that, or you're newer to the ecosystem, quick tip: phone interviews don't necessarily mean on the phone. They also can be an initial video call. And so the lighting and the background and all of those things do apply. A lot of those things really do carry over, especially if you are doing a live interview, right? Because you are going to be on the screen, or if you have to do a video recording for your exercise. All of those tips are very much applicable. The other thing I would say to that too is I know some of us shy away from the tell me about yourself question, and you may think it doesn't apply in a technical interview standpoint as much as a phone interview, but I will say anytime you talk with someone at a place that you're approaching for employment, be prepared with that technical interview, phone interview, or something different, because that's really the first question most people are going to ask you, just as a way to kind of level set and get to know them. So be prepared with that, because it's highly likely you'll get a few minutes just to kind of do that general introduction with whomever is doing your technical interview. Let's talk about the live technical interview scenario and kind of what that looks like first. So one thing I would say is this is one, I'll be honest, that kind of made me really, really nervous, right? Because you're on a call and it's like, I got to do this. I got to do this right here in front of somebody else. And they're going to see all behind the curtain in terms of my ability to navigate through Salesforce. And I would just say to that, having done some in my past and coaching others, take a deep breath and just realize it boils down largely to communication over content. I would suggest having a dev org or a sandbox that you know well set up. Back to the kind of communication over content and unpacking that a little bit more, asking great follow-up questions is absolutely critical. Some of the solution architects that I've worked with that do technical interviews will say, I don't care how much they know about Salesforce or how they build it. I can teach them those things. But the ability to ask awesome follow-up questions or even questions for help, their ability to say those things and ask those things is what sets them apart from others who just come in here and, go a million miles an hour with their mouse building all the things, but don't communicate with me as they're building. To that end, I would encourage you to think of a live technical interview as a live training, which is often something you'll also do in this career. And that really looks like dictating what you're doing on the screen. So where are you moving your mouse? I'm actually going to go up here to the setup cog, which is in the top right-hand corner, and I'll click on that. And then I want to click on setup so I can get to the back end of Salesforce. Or I'm going to navigate over here to the 9-digit waffle, as many call it, so that I can see the various apps that are available in this org. Those are a couple examples of that. Talk through it as you're doing it. That sometimes helps fill the silence, gives you a little bit of peace to be able to kind of talk through it, right? To get some words out. And it's a good indicator that you're able to share and show what you're doing in the system and not just drive around like a crazy person. I think we've all probably experienced that on a call before where somebody's just going crazy. It's like they're driving 100 miles an hour with their mouse and you're like, I have no idea how you just got to where you're at, but like, can you please slow down and tell me where we're at? So think about that. Don't let your nerves get the best of you and just talk through it. If you're clueless, ask for help. That's a tip for really, a lot of different scenarios, not just technical interviews. But if you don't know, it's okay to ask, right? Nobody expects or actually can be an expert on all things Salesforce. Something I like to say when I'm doing them is, that's a really great question. I don't remember how to get to this place and set up, but would you be able to quickly get me started? And I think I'll be able to take it from there. One thing, and I'm sure you've all experienced this as well, is it's like, I feel like I need a catalog in my brain of all the terms that I can search in Salesforce setup to get to what I need. Like if you want to check email, like if your org is sending out emails, you have to know to search for deliverability settings. But most people don't know that right off the jump, right? Because you're newer or you don't touch it as much. So don't hesitate to say, I've seen that screen before and I forget how to get there. Would you mind giving me that quick keyword that I type in here? And then I'll be able to take it from there. This is a fill in the blank. See if anybody knows what it is here. So take notes of what you don't know that you're asked. And any guesses? Put it in the chat if you want. I'm not going to even dare look at the chat because I don't want to mess up my screen.
Oh,
so Anita,
I'll read the chat.
If there's any in there.
Amber said follow up.
Yay, you get the gold star for the evening. Yes, if you don't know, take great notes and follow up, right? That's next level skill, like we talked about, that separates us from other people that we know, hey, I'm not going to know it all, but I can show you that when I'm in front of a client or I'm in front of a coworker and I don't know, I'll take notes and I'll get back with them. And I won't just say I'm going to do it. I do it. So that's really just kind of business 101 too. But you'd be surprised in the workplace, even how often that doesn't happen. So being able to do that is really crucial. Okay, let's talk about the other two options as well that we tend to see. The next is the take home timed, where you have a quick turnaround. So this is usually like 1 to 2 hours, and they'll send it to you via an email, and you'll get this list of requirements as like a use case that you have to build. It can really be a lot of different things, right? So it can be basic things, it could be complex things, it could include documentation, it might not. You might have to video it, like video a training. You might not. It really spans all across the board. So do take a step back, read all the requirements, and identify what you can knock out quickly versus some of those things that you struggle with, and time block based on that. So what do you know? What don't you know? What are a few quick little details that you can pull in that you think are kind of those user experience things that take you to the next level, and then prepare to leave yourself a bit of time for wrap up and polishing. Consider the details. So think about things like those next levels that I talked about. So industry specifics. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in our example, but if they're a healthcare, if they're a healthcare consultancy, for example, what are some things that you could do that would show that, would it make sense to have, a doctor's object or a medical records object, or would it make sense to rename opportunities as potential patients or something along those lines? Think about what would make sense for the industry that you're applying for. Also, what are some of those big bang for your buck UI enhancements? And I'll give you a couple, but I'd encourage you to take some time to just think about that and look through it. A lot of times they're going to have you start in a fresh sandbox. So if you have a sandbox already built that you've customized and you love it and you're comfy in there and you know where everything is at, do be prepared that it could be a freshy org. And so you're going to need to do some of those things again. One of the ones that's really obvious from the top is, I don't know why Salesforce does this, but when you set up any new object, it defaults to the related tab instead of the details tab. And that's the first tab you see. So anytime I set up a new org, I go in there and I change that. I move the details tab over to the left, and I make sure that that's actually the tab that's defaulted to. And you can set all that up through on the lightning pages. So that's a quick one just to think about. What are some other things that you could consider? I'd encourage you to take some time thinking about, some of the customizations that you could do. Think things like the graphics, right? Think about the color scheme and the logos and the app name and some of those things that really could set you apart quickly. That also might cover your tracks a little bit if you're kind of like me and flows are not your most awesome skill. And if they need a lot of flow, if they have a lot of flow homework, you'd want to spend time in that. But where are some places that you can win some brownie points in areas that you're comfortable? Another thing to consider, even if they don't ask for documentation, is what documentation could you provide? If you have enough time, that's always a nice little thing to include. Is there a lucid chart if you're really good with lucid charting? I'm not saying you have to figure that out on the fly, right? But if that happens to be one of your skills, use it to your advantage. If you're really good at putting together a slide deck, which is not necessarily mine aren't awesome slides, but if that's your strength, then how could you incorporate that, right? To put together a couple, 2-3 slides if you wanted to do a training on it or something like that. Just look for some quick things that would be easy for you to kind of take yourself to that next level. Some other things you could consider for documentation would be what follow-up questions you would have asked if you had the time to do so. What assumptions did you make as you built so that you could progress the build? Like maybe you assumed that that medical office's object would be helpful, and so you went ahead and built that, and maybe you built a flow or something based on that. So what assumptions were made? And then what feedback, if you were given the opportunity, what feedback or questions would you ask of the stakeholder? If you were going to kind of think about more of that VA role, and what questions would you need to solidify the requirements? And those are all things that you can add in. Again, please don't feel like you have to, but if your strengths lie more in that area, or you're applying for a position, maybe that is less technical, but more BA wise, or it's going to have some training, think about those things that you could add that would really be helpful. I will say I would plan for automations. I haven't seen one yet that didn't include at least one flow. So if you're not comfortable with it, that's definitely a tool, whether you're preparing for a technical interview or just preparing for your first role. That is a tool that would be really helpful to at least have a baseline knowledge of. If they're too time consuming, sometimes they ask for really complex flows. I had one where it was just like way more than I was able to do. So think about creating a process workflow instead. And if you're not going to be able to nail it, then maybe that's a way that you score some points, is to draw up that Lucid chart and show how that flow is actually going to work visually instead of actually building it. I think you can cover that a little bit too, right? Like when you send it in, you'd say, with the time allowed, I knew I wouldn't have time to build it to completion, but I did want to provide you that initial step that I like to provide to my clients or my customers or my end users to verify. And that's this visual workflow, so I can verify that the functionality is working the way that they are asking. Okay, the longer turnaround scenarios. These are fun and stressful. I'd be lying if I said they weren't. Be prepared that they will consume a good part of however many days that you have to complete them. They usually are several days where you're asked to build more complex solutions or several solutions for smaller, for several smaller requests, and often ask for a video walkthrough as well. So think big picture, really. If you're allowed this type of circumstance, how can you make the most of the fact that you have several days to pull some awesome things together, and you also have the course of several days to make an impression? So what follow-up questions would be appropriate for you to ask? They are going to send this to you in an email, same thing like the other, but are there follow-up questions that you could ask in that first day that would show that you have strong BA skills, that you can ask for specific details that might help clarify the build that they're asking for? All the short-term tips that we just talked about do still apply, but there's a couple things I'd add into each, or at least one thing I'd add into each to really think about in this long-term scenario. So take a step back, but plan out your days and your tasks. And we're going to kind of go through an exercise for that. I think, and this may be somewhat Audrey specific in how I operate, but I think it is true for a lot of people I've helped with interviews as well. The very fact that you're going to get this, what feels like huge list of requirements to do a bunch of things that you probably aren't like an expert at yet, is a little bit stressful. But breaking it down, taking steps to plan it out and whatnot is super helpful to put your mind at ease and to give you confidence, because that's so important as you prepare to embark on several days of intense building. Same thing on considering the details. Identify and work in several of those small next level details. If you have several days to build, that should really be more of a must do than a nice to have. That you should be able to find a little bit of time to do that, and use that time to your advantage to really make an impact. I would say similarly, prepare to plan a little bit of documentation, even if they don't ask for it, and make sure it's quite polished. Do plan for automations in this scenario, and I think in these you would need to plan that you're both going to build and document it. And even if you, if you're not successful in being able to get the automation to do exactly what they're asking, being able to show that you understand what they're asking and you can show it visually is good. And that shows that you understand it. You're just not 100% sure on how to do those next level flow abilities. These are often going to include a video of you actually either walking through it or, so two things, either walking through it from the final product and showing what you've done, or actually you building it live on the screen. And in that scenario, if you have to build it live on the screen, I would say practice. I've had one of these, and I don't know how many times I recorded myself building the same thing over and over until I felt really good about it. But that's the great thing about a video recording is you can just erase it and start over. You might have to clear the information out of your org, but you can do several versions until you're really confident in what you've done. When preparing for the video, one thing to think about is what technology are you going to use? Sometimes they'll require a specific technology, but that's one of those things if you're just kind of getting into this journey and you have some time, or you want to take a break from studying, because let's be honest, sometimes it feels like so much. Do something fun and check out a couple screen video recordings, and maybe spend 2 hours getting comfortable with something like a Loom or something like that you can use that is kind of fun to explore. And then when this time comes, if it does and they require something like this, then you have a tool that you've at least used before. Similarly, like we've talked about, what extras can you work into the video that show the next level abilities? I'll give you an example I used. So I was given a task where I had to upload several accounts, and I think it was like 500 accounts, and they wanted me to name them all, and I needed to include like the name and the address and the email. Like where am I going to come up with 500 different names and emails and whatnot? Well, there's a tool called Mockaroo that you can go to, and you can set up the exact field names, and it just gives you dummy data. And it was perfect because I didn't have to, figure out how I was going to come up with a naming structure or whatnot. I was just able to pop in the information that I needed. And so I showed that on my video to say, like, you will be surprised how often in a technical role like this, you need mock data, because guess what? Developer sandboxes don't have any data in them. Only partial and full sandboxes do. And a lot of times you'll build in a developer sandbox. And so you do have to seed it with test data. And so that's a way to show, like, hey, I know a little bit about this. I know how to pop in some test data. So think through things that you could show in a video that would show that you have some next level abilities there. I'd also say don't delay on the complex and difficult parts. I know sometimes we have a tendency to put those off, and we want to do the fun, or we want to do the things that we're most comfortable with. But my suggestion would be to start in on some of those things at the jump at the top, and kind of get your bearings. And then when you need a break because you're on like flow version 35 and it's still not doing what you want, and you need some time to like actually knock something out so you can be confident, jump over then and pop in your logo and set up your theme and move your details tab. Plan your work so you can have those mental stimulation too, and the confidence builders as well. And then this sounds obvious, but hit the deadline, right? Like make sure you get your submission in timely and leave enough time for that. Okay, so I want to walk through an exercise. And when I was thinking about what would be helpful, obviously if we could do like an actual technical interview on the screen, that'd be great, but that's a little bit hard to do in this particular setup. So what I think would be also helpful is walking through a planning your work strategy exercise So I'm going to give you an example. And what I'd ask you to do, we'll talk through it here, is to just kind of grab a piece of scratch paper, or if you want to pull up notes or something like that, or Google Docs, or what works best for you, go ahead and just jot down some notes to the following. So here's our situation or our exercise. So you have a 4-day turnaround to video yourself doing the following, and you're interviewing for a consultancy position at a company that specializes in building and supporting architecture and engineering systems. So said another way, your likely clients are going to be from the architecture or engineering space. And these are the things that they're going to ask you to build. So what I would ask, don't feel like you have to figure out how to do these things in the next 5 minutes, but take 5 minutes and do your time blocks. Set out your strategy for how you're going to approach this over the course of 4 days. And then on the sidebar, maybe challenge yourself to come up with 2 or 3 next level details that you can include. And I've given you some hints because I've told you a little bit about what the role is and what the industry is. So what are some things that you could include that would be helpful? Because I had technical difficulties, we're going to be a little shorter on time. So maybe let's drop it down to 4 minutes. I'll start my timer and we'll go from there. Okay, we are there. How was that? I know I think y'all are muted, but feel free to pop it in the chat. Oops, don't tell. I cut off 10 seconds. Let's take a look here, kind of what I would, how I would go about it. And there's no right or wrong answer, right? This is just how I would personally approach it. So on day one, I would definitely review my requirements. I'd create my work plan like we're doing here, and I'd provide or get together an outline for documentation, and I would plan to document as I built. I'd review each requirement and think through follow-up questions, and then I'd send those follow-up questions over to the recruiter. I'd complete 3 basic validation rules. I'd complete the simple flow, and I'd design the account and contact page layouts. On day 2, I'm hopeful by then that the recruiter has responded to my questions, so I can incorporate those into the rest of my build. I'd start in on that complex flow, probably start that early in the day. I'd design my opportunity page layout if I need a brain break. It's kind of a bit more fun sometimes, unless you love automations, which is awesome. Go you. I'd complete the 2 complex validation rules. I'd make sure that I load my 300 accounts. There's a quick tip for you. There is a purpose behind the order in which you upload account and contacts. Accounts must go first. Then on the next day, I would load my 600 related contacts. I'd finish out that build of the basic opportunity process, make sure I'm wrapping up that complex flow unless I was awesome and I nailed it on day 2. I'd finish up any documentation that I had, and I try to aim to do a dry run of my video, and then I would polish. On day 4 would be all about the video. And like I shared before, don't just plan right now that it's going to take more than 1 run or 2 runs for that matter. You're going to probably do some videoing and some editing and some cropping and some re-videoing, and it might take several attempts. And then you send that off to the recruiter, right, with all your information, your video, all your awesome documentation that you pulled together, those questions you would have liked to ask a little bit in more detail of the stakeholder who was really invested in this build, any lucid charts or training documentation that you pulled together, whatever you kind of chose to add as your pizzazz. And then day 5, so post-submission, I would follow up with the recruiter and just make sure that they received it, ask if they had any questions, clarify when you might get some feedback, and then sleep and then tend to all the things that you neglected in day 1 through 4, because like I said, those turnarounds can feel a little bit grueling, especially if you're working a regular job during that time frame, or you're parenting or taking care of parents, any of the life things. Just want to acknowledge that it is not easy, but it is oh so growing, and you will come out of the other side, I promise, and you will have learned a ton. Would anybody care to share in the chat some of the things that you came up with to add a little pizzazz, your next level things that you thought that you could do because you were interviewing at a consultancy that specializes in architecture and engineering?
Okay, so Jonathan Smith says customize the theme to match their branding. Tabitha says themes and branding as well.
Okay. That's great. Those are really, really crucial, but key wins, and you'll be surprised. Like I said, I work at a consultancy, and so I see, I don't know, 8 to 10 orgs pretty regularly. You would be surprised how many aren't branded or themed at all. They're still basic. Some people don't even know that can be done. So that's really, really helpful. I'd encourage y'all to take some time and think about a few other things too that you think could be real needle movers. Think about field names and how you could incorporate the one that I did. I use this example because I can speak to it. That's the firm I work for, specializes in architects and engineers. And I know that they call engineers professional engineers. They often will have it have just the acronym for PE, and then they do a lot of certifications. So you have to have a license to be an engineer or an architect, and they do a lot of sustainability. You see LEED buildings and whatnot. So those are some things that I added in that really kind of at least showed, because I am not as technical, but at least showed that I understood their business a little bit. Okay, this is homework, so we're not going to walk through it here on the call, but this is something I would highly, highly encourage you to do. And you can screenshot this if you'd like to, but video yourself building the following flow. And then I'd encourage you to share the video for feedback. You can share that with a friend. You can share that with a study group or a study group partner on the Talent Stacker Facebook group, somewhere else. And be willing to receive that feedback, right? And that's how we all grow. Hopefully, I've been completely transparent with you that you don't have to know all the technical things to be successful, and you don't have to be the best presenter either. But being willing to improve is really crucial. So include your documentation and your follow-up questions and the things that you assumed and whatnot, and be specific about what type of feedback you're looking for. And then do the thing, right? Like get out there and try it. And then once you've done it, this I pulled up from ChatGPT in like 10 seconds. Just said, give me a use case for building an opportunity flow in Salesforce. And it popped all these things out. And that was my my scenario. And then I could run with it. So then go back to ChatGPT and ask for a different one, maybe a different flavor, and do it again until you are comfortable, especially if you're feeling you're feeling like you just need some hands-on build time. I know sometimes studying can feel a little bit grueling. Getting that hands-on build time, or perhaps you're through your project already and you're heavy into the recruitment cycle, and you just want to brush up on your skills. Take some time to do an exercise or two like this and get in and kind of reinvigorate that drive for why you're doing what you're doing. I'll end with encouragement and then pop it out for questions for you. So just a bit of encouragement for you from my experience in the position that I am in. I would say, and I can say this confidently because I was a recruiter, I bombed my technical interview. I don't think I nailed a thing in terms of where things were at. So this is very much a do as I say, not as I do. I've learned a ton as far as how technical interviews go since then. But when I say I bombed the technical ability portion of the interview, but I was able to make up for it by doing some of the tips I shared with you, by asking awesome questions. And the solution architect who interviewed me, I worked with quite a bit once I was hired, and he's like, your question asking totally got you this position. He said, you did a really nice job not losing your cool because you didn't know what was going on, which is a lot of the time if you work at a consultancy or sometimes even as an admin for your users, where you don't really know what they're asking for on the call, and you're just like, I don't quite get this, but I can restate, I can say it a different way, I can keep my cool and not just lose it on the phone. So think about those things, like we said at the top, that the communication is so much more important than the content, and be encouraged that if you are not the most technical person on this call or in the room, it is okay. There is so much more to a Salesforce career than just being able to build flows. I'd actually venture to say the side of you that is the more business savvy side and the ability to interact with people is very much more important than your technical skills, because those can be taught. Some of those other more touchy-feely things, not so much. That is what I have for y'all today. Thank you so much for being patient with my technical issues this evening. Are there any questions that I can answer?
There was a question earlier from Mina. What can be included in documentation?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about some of that. Um, some things to consider in terms of what you built is like, okay, these are the objects that I built. These are the flows, or excuse me, these are the fields that I placed on objects. If I set up different record types, I'd want to document the different record types that I set up. If I have page layouts there that I've created, maybe different page layouts for different profiles, or I created a specific app that they're going to use. The flows that you've built and what the description is, what the name of it is, what the API name is, if there is one, the profiles you've set up. Really, you're just documenting absolutely everything you built. It's almost like your admin guide, right? That like if you had to turn over your system to somebody else, they would know exactly what you've built. Great question. What else?
Let's see. I think Jamie, have you seen many security or visibility questions pop up?
Oh, I, in a technical interview, haven't, unless, I mean, it's going to be all I've seen has been, if it's there, it's how do you build it, right? So like, how do you build um, a permission set group? Or sometimes what they'll say is like, they'll give you the use case, but they won't say build a permission set group. They'll say, I need to group together um, some abilities to allow my users to log in without MFA, to log in without single sign-on, to use flows or have extra access to delete certain objects. Can you please show me how you would build that in Salesforce? And so then you would go in and actually be like, oh yeah, that's a permission set group. And this is how I would do it. And that's another great example too. Like, I have no idea what they want me to build. Hey, I don't know exactly what I would use, but if you wouldn't mind sharing with me the specific or the specific task, I'm pretty sure I can build it once you give me just a quick tip on what exactly you're looking for.
All right, another question from Carrie. I know we're at time. Can you answer one more?
Oh, of course.
Sure. Okay. Carrie asks, what types of amazing questions did you ask that so impressed your interviewer?
Well, because because I didn't know what I was doing, it was kind of like what I just exampled to you, right? Like that's a really good question. I know I've built this out before, but I forget the name of the thing that I should look for here. Or I remember one, I had to set up a validation rule, and oh, I loathe validation rules. I don't speak in commas, ands, and ors and parentheses. So I kind of was able to come back and say, okay, I know these are the basics in terms of what I'm looking for, but could you help me get started in terms of like um, what I think it's called the functions, right? That you have to include in order to make this work. And ChatGPT is that's crazy to say, but ChatGPT really wasn't a thing when I interviewed. Now it is. So that's a huge tool that you can use and even share. Like, I actually don't know how to build that validation rule, but what I do when I run into a scenario like that is I pop it in over here, and feel free to share yourself doing that on the screen. I pop over here to ChatGPT. Here's the question I ask it, and it'll pop up and tell me, and then I'll pop that in there. I'll give it a try in my sandbox. I'd never want to do that in a production org, and I'd see how it works and make sure that it works, and then kind of talk through that process of how you solution, even if you don't actually know the answer.
Okay.
You can
One more.
tell.
I'm a liar. One more last question.
Oh, perfect. No, I appreciate it.
Catherine said, loved your presentation. How many flows or flow related builds did you do before you felt confident?
Oh, I have tricked you totally. I am not confident or extremely competent in my flow building abilities. I can do the very basics, but when it comes to more complex flows, I guarantee you, probably at least half of you on this call are more skilled in building flows than I am. I'm trying to get into it more. I really, really want to learn it. But my job now is a lot more relational and managing our clients and doing some of the BA. I think pretty sure Anita's in a similar situation, or maybe she isn't as heavy in flow as she is on the front end.
No, not at all. I completely switched over to Scrum Master and forgotten everything I've learned.
Yes,
Which was
yeah. So
before flows,
having you
so
think,
like not even that.
yes, yes, for sure. It's just one of those things. Um, and I think that's part of interviewing in general. It's just being genuine and like I own what I know, and I am not afraid to say what I don't know. But I just be yourself. And if those aren't your best thing, you can say that, but say, I make up for it in client interactions or my awesome ability to ask questions or to get through sticky situations or whatever comes up.
All right, that's it. No more questions.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much for being patient with me. It's been a pleasure to spend my evening with you.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining on a Thursday night or 3:30 a.m. to the one person from
Ah,
Zimbabwe. Thank you
yes.
for your patience. I hope you got a lot out of this session. I know I did. All right, bye.